How Joan of Arc was trapped before she was burned alive, Joan of Arc's final days. You can feel the rope biting into your wrists, the coarse fibers sawing against skin that has worn armor and silk but has never felt as raw as it does now. The cell reeks of something that isn't quite mold, a damp, cloying scent that clings to the back of your throat. It is decay. Human decay. You are 19 years old, a child by the standards of the court, but a veteran by the standards of the battlefield. In the last 2 years, you have done what kings couldn't do. You have crowned a nation and shattered siege lines that military strategists said were unbreakable. English commanders have woken up screaming your name from their nightmares, their invincible archers trembling at the sight of your banner. But they got you anyway. Your head is shaved. The golden hair that once flowed beneath your helmet, now reduced to stubble. The cold air makes your scalp sting like 10,000 needles are pressing into your skin. A constant, physical reminder of your humiliation. They dragged you through that shame like it was a coronation in reverse, unmaking you piece by piece until only the girl remained. Your armor is gone, replaced by rags. Your voice doesn't carry anymore. It bounces off the stone walls and dies in the damp straw. The guards don't flinch when you speak, they leer. You signed a paper today. The words are still a blur, dancing before your tired eyes like ash in the wind, but you remember the shape of what they meant. Renounce your saints. Your voices are demons, tricksters sent from the pit to deceive you. The visions that changed the course of history, that drove the English from the Loire hallucinations of a fevered mind. The mission God gave you, a delusion born of pride. And wear this. This dress? This suffocating, degrading dress that turns you back into a thing instead of a warrior. A symbol of submission to a world that hates you. You thought you were saving your life, buying time to pray or perhaps escape. What you actually signed was the perfect trap. A legal snare woven with ink and malice. And the cruelest part, they designed it so you would walk right into it yourself, driven by the very instinct to survive that kept you alive on the battlefield. This is the story of how Joan of Arc was legally murdered. How the most sophisticated legal machine of the medieval world was weaponized against a teenage girl who had no idea she was walking into an inescapable cage. This isn't just about a trial, it is an autopsy of justice itself. This is about the systematic destruction of a human being using the law as a weapon, sharpening statutes into daggers. And what happened to her in 1431 is still happening today, wherever power fears truth. If you think history is worth getting right, stay close because this is a story that history tried to erase, burying the details under centuries of myth and stained glass. Let's go back to 1429. You need to understand who Joan was before they broke her, because that is the only way to understand how they broke her. France is dying. Not metaphorically. Actually, literally dying. Its fields fallow, and its people starving. The 100 Years' War has been grinding for over a century, a generational trauma that has seeped into the soil. Think about that, a century. 100 years of your nation bleeding out while the English take piece after piece, castle after castle, like wolves tearing at a carcass. The South is English. The North is English. The coast is English. Your king sits in a palace in Bourges. uncrowned, watching his kingdom shrivel like a corpse left in the sun. The war isn't just draining gold anymore, it is draining the very soul of the people. It has drained hope, leaving behind a cynicism that tastes like ash. Military commanders are convinced the English can never be beaten. They have accepted defeat as a law of nature. Nobles are making deals with the enemy, trading loyalty for land. Parents are teaching their children that French victory is a fairy tale, a story told to comfort the dying. This isn't a war anymore. It is an occupation wearing the costume of a war, a slow strangulation of a culture. Then, in January 1429, a girl walks into the Dauphin's court. She is from Domremy, a place so small that most educated men in France couldn't find it on a map if their lives depended on it. She is illiterate, signing her name with a cross or a shaky scrawl. She has never held a sword, never commanded a squad, never seen a map of the realm. Her name is Joan, and she tells Charles that she has been sent by God to save France. Most people dismiss her as insane, another visionary in an age of madness. But she is not insane. She is something worse. She is confident. She tells the Dauphin exactly what he needs to hear, piercing through his own insecurity. That God hasn't abandoned France. That the English will be driven out. That there is a purpose to all this suffering. He lets her ride with his armies. A desperate gamble by a desperate man. What happens next breaks every law of medieval warfare. Joan, at the siege of Orleans, the most important stronghold left in English hands, the key to the south. For months, the English have held it with barely 5,000 soldiers, strangling the city into submission. But English soldiers are experienced, battle-hardened veterans who know how to kill. The French have thrown everything at Orleans and bounced off like arrows off stone, their morale shattered. Then Joan arrives, and something changes in the air itself. It isn't that she fights differently. She doesn't know siege tactics or logistics. It is that the soldiers believe differently. When she rides toward those walls, banner snapping in the wind, they follow her. Not because she is given a tactical order, but because something in her presence says, this will not fail. And somehow, miraculously, it doesn't. Orléans falls. The English commander is captured. The impossible becomes possible. One victory, then another, then another. A domino effect of divine intervention. In May 1429, Joan stands beside Charles as he is crowned King of France at Reims. The holy oil anointing, a head she made royal. She is wearing armor, her hair cut short, a sword at her side. The crowds are screaming her name. This isn't just a religious coronation anymore. It is a validation of the impossible. A 19-year-old peasant girl has fundamentally rewritten what is possible. She has proven to an entire nation that the English are not invincible demons, but men who can bleed. She has given back something that seemed lost forever hope. By summer 1429, Joan of Arc is the most powerful person in France. Not officially, she holds no title, no lance. Officially, Charles is the king. But everyone knows the truth. The girl who hears voices from saints is the reason France isn't dead yet. The English realize this, too, with a cold. Strategic clarity. And they begin making plans not to defeat her in battle, for the battlefield has become her pulpit. She has proven they can't do that. She is too fast, too inspired. She is blessed. Or if you are cynical, she has got luck that defies mathematics. No. They are going to destroy her in a courtroom because there is one place Joan's divine mandate doesn't work inside the architecture of theology and law, where rules are written by men in robes. In May 1430, Joan is leading troops at Compiègne, a small town near the border between French and Burgundian territory. The Burgundians are technically French nobles, but they have been English allies since the Treaty of Troyes, traitors to their own blood. They are playing both sides, and everyone knows it. A Burgundian soldier nabs Joan during a skirmish, grabbing her cape and pulling her from her horse. It is almost mundane. One moment she is on horseback rallying troops. The next, she is dismounted, surrounded, captured, face pressed into the mud. It should have been the end of the story. A prisoner of war, maybe ransomed, maybe traded, maybe released after the war. But it wasn't. Instead, the Burgundians sold her 10,000 livres to the price of a saint. That is the price of the woman who single-handedly changed the course of European warfare. A king's ransom for a peasant. For context, that sum of money could feed a family for 2 centuries. It isn't just ransoming a prisoner of war. It is a sale, a transaction of flesh and spirit. The English aren't buying a girl. They are buying an icon they need to destroy, a symbol they must dismantle. Here is what is fascinating about the English strategy. Joan isn't valuable because she is a military threat anymore. In chains, she commands no armies. She is valuable because she is a symbol. She is proof that God favors France. She is living evidence that the English occupation can fail, that their claim to the throne is invalid. If they can prove she is a fraud, that her voices are demonic whispers, that her visions are delusions of a sick mind, that she is a witch working dark magic, then they haven't just killed a soldier. They have killed an idea. They have made her testimony against herself. They have used her own mouth to recant everything she was, turning her victories into sins. In January 1431, Joan arrived in Rouen, the English stronghold, the military capital of English-occupied France. The trial that follows is supposed to be a religious investigation, an ecclesiastical court run by bishops, theologians, experts in church law. It all has the appearance of legitimacy, draped in Latin and incense, but it is a show trial from the start. Every aspect of it is choreographed to produce a corpse. Joan is held in chains, not in a convent with nuns as church law requires for female prisoners, but in a military fortress with 5 English soldiers guarding her 24/7. They sleep in her cell, drink in her cell, leering at her day and night. The courtroom is filled with pro-English judges, men whose careers depend on the occupation. The prosecutor is working directly with English military command. Her advocates are actually judges in disguise, arguing against her instead of for her. giving her bad advice to trap her. And they are prepared to destroy her systematically, question by question, for 70 sessions. 70 separate court hearings over months. They grind her down. They hammer at her with logic she cannot comprehend. The brightest theologians in France versus a 19-year-old girl who cannot read or write. A David without a sling against a Goliath of intellect. She has no lawyer. She has no advisor. She is alone in a room full of men who want her dead. But here is the thing that baffles them. She is winning. Not in an official sense. The verdict is pre-written. She is never going to convince these judges. But she is winning in a way that matters more. She is winning in the court of human intelligence, exposing their hypocrisy. When they ask if she knows she is in God's grace, a classic theological trap designed so any answer condemns you. If she says yes, she is arrogant. If she says no, she is guilty. She delivers one of the most perfect responses in the history of language. If I am not, may God put me there. And if I am, may God so keep me. The scribes stop writing, stunned. They ask if God hates the English. She answers, of the love or hate God may have for the English, I know nothing. But I do know that they will all be driven from France except those who die here. It isn't defiant. It isn't reckless. It is perfect. She is outsmarting men who spent 20 years in universities studying Aristotle. She is quoting scripture back at theologians. She is parrying every theological trap they set with a peasant's simple wisdom. They threaten her with torture, show her the instruments in the castle, dungeon the rack, the strappado, devices designed to systematically dislocate your joints while keeping you alive long enough to suffer. They explain exactly how the bones will pop and the muscles will tear. She looks at them and says, truly, if you were to tear my limbs from me and drive my soul from my body, I would not tell you anything more. And then the critical part, the legal checkmate. And if I did say anything, I would later declare that you had forced me to say it. She is telling them that confessions extracted through torture are worthless in the eyes of God and man. She understands legal process better than they do, grasping the concept of duress intuitively. She understands that they can break her body, but her testimony will always be compromised if they do. They back down. They can't torture her because it would invalidate the trial. So they switch tactics. If they can't break her through theology or torture, they will break her through fear and exhaustion. They are going to kill her. But not yet. Not before she signs something that will destroy her legacy. May 24th, 1431. You are dragged out of your cell for the last time. Or so you think. You don't know. It is the last time. But your body knows something has shifted in how the guards touch you, rougher, more urgent. There is finality in their grip. They bring you to the cemetery of Saint Ouen, a public place, a square lined with graves. Hundreds of people are already gathered. No, thousands. A sea of faces waiting for blood. Word has spread that this is the day Joan burns. There is a scaffold with 2 preachers on it, elevated above the mob. Bishop Pierre Cauchon is there, the architect of this nightmare. The man running the trial, the man who has been orchestrating your destruction for English gold, he is pro-English. He is ambitious. He has been trying to become Archbishop of Rouen for years, and Joan is his stepping stone. And the English have made it clear, condemn Joan, and the position is yours. He is going to preach at you now. A final sermon condemning you as a heretic, a witch, a danger to Christendom, his voice booming over the crowd. But first, they give you a choice, a cruel sliver of hope. A notary steps forward with a quill and ink. He has a document. He explains it. Or rather, a short version is read aloud so the crowd can hear. You will renounce your visions. You will admit your voices are demonic. You will agree to wear women's clothing and obey the church in all things. And if you sign it, your life will be spared. You will go to prison instead of to the stake. There is an executioner standing right next to the pile of wood, torch in hand. You can see it stacked, dry, ready to catch. You are terrified. You are exhausted. You have been in chains for months, sleeping on straw. You have been interrogated for 70 sessions. Your body is fragile, starved. Your mind is wearing thin. And you sign. You scratch a cross or a circle, surrendering your truth for your life. Later, witnesses at Joan's rehabilitation trial, held 25 years after her death when the English were gone, would testify that the document they actually saw her mark was only a few lines long, a simple pledge. They testify that the full confession the court produced afterward was fabricated, expanded, revised, made more damning than what she actually signed. They would claim what happened in that moment was a kind of ecclesiastical sleight of hand, a magic trick with ink. She signed something brief and desperate, a plea for mercy. What they filed in the records was something comprehensive and damning, a total rejection of God's will. But in the end, it didn't matter. The trap wasn't the text. It was the act of signing. It was the admission of guilt. They march her back to prison, past the disappointed executioner. The crowd murmurs. Some are relieved she wasn't burned. They saw her as a holy figure. Some are disappointed. They wanted a show. The spectacle is over, but not in the way anyone expected. She is going to live, condemned to bread of sorrow and water of affliction, but alive. Bishop Cauchon preaches his sermon anyway, finishing what he started, his voice ringing with triumph, condemning her from the scaffold while she is already surrendered, cementing her guilt in the minds of the people. The performance continues. She is locked back in her cell, the heavy door slamming shut. Now, here is where the truth gets colder than the stone around her. Joan believes she saved her life. She believes that the promise was real. Life in prison, protected by the church. That is the deal she made, but her captors never intended to honor it. See, there are rules in inquisitorial law, precise and unyielding. Medieval religious law is a machine. If you are tried for heresy and you confess, you can be spared the death penalty. You get prison, life imprisonment, yes, but life. It is mercy technically, But there is a second category that has no mercy. A trapdoor in the legal floor. Relapsed heresy. If you are a heretic who repents and then goes back to heresy, if you relapse into your old ways, you are automatically handed over to secular authorities to be executed. No trial. No second chance. No appeal. The relapse itself is the death sentence. The English and Bishop Cauchon needed her dead, but they needed her dead as a relapsed heretic, because if they just executed her for the initial heresy charge after she recanted, it would look like they had broken the deal. It would look like murder. It would look like the law itself was a lie, and they needed to maintain the illusion of justice. But if she relapsed, if she went back to heresies after signing the confession, then everything was her fault. The law worked perfectly. She had a chance at mercy and threw it away. They didn't just want to kill her, they wanted to discredit her. They engineered the perfect trap, a scenario with only one exit death. They took her right back to the same military fortress, not the church prison she was promised. She was still in chains, still surrounded by 5 English soldiers, 24/7, who hated her. They shaved her head as humiliation, stripping her of her femininity. They made her wear the dress that she was promised would save her. But that actually made her catastrophically vulnerable to the men in her cell. For months, Joan's men's clothing had been her armor. Not metaphorically, literally. She testified during the trial that she tied her breeches and tunic with dozens of tight cords, binding them together so tightly they couldn't be removed without destroying the fabric or waking her up. It was armor against sexual assault. It was protection in a room full of hostile men. Witnesses at her later rehabilitation trial would confirm that English lords had attempted to rape her in her cell, stopped only by those knots. The cords in her clothes were the only thing stopping it. Now she was in a dress, vulnerable, exposed, with no way to secure herself. The taunts started. The threats started. The promises that if she didn't cooperate, worse things would happen. 4 days passed. 4 days of this living hell. Then something happened that would seal her fate. One night, and here is where the testimony of the rehabilitation trial becomes absolutely critical. The guards took her dress. They physically removed it or stole it while she slept. She was left with only the men's clothes they had thrown at her in a sack. The forbidden clothes. They gave her an impossible choice. Face the soldiers naked and alone, inviting assault, or put on the forbidden clothes and become a heretic. She chose safety. She chose dignity. On May 28th, 4 days after her confession, 4 days into this arrangement, the judges came to her cell. Bishop Cauchon walked in, a smile likely hiding behind his pious expression. The other judges filed in behind him. They found her in men's clothes. Joan told them exactly what happened. She explained that the dress had been taken, that she couldn't defend herself in a dress among men, that she had no choice. But here is what mattered. She also admitted something else, emboldened by the betrayal. She said her voices had returned, that Saints Michael and Gabriel had come back to her, calling her a traitor for signing the abjuration, that she never should have renounced them. That was it. That was the moment the trap slammed completely shut. By her own testimony, in the judge's presence, in front of witnesses, she had returned to wearing men's clothing, explicit violation of the confession, and admitted her voices had returned. Admission of relapsed heresy. The verdict was immediate, unanimous, no deliberation needed. She was officially a relapsed heretic. The promise of life had lasted exactly 4 days. Here is the truly diabolical part. Joan didn't understand what had happened. She thought she was being honest. She thought she was explaining her circumstances to reasonable men. She had no idea she was reading a death sentence into the record with her own words. She didn't realize that the judges had engineered a scenario where she had to choose between her safety and her survival. They took away the dress, knowing she would put on the clothes. They left the soldiers in her cell, knowing what would happen. They counted on her fear and they counted on her honesty, and they weaponized both against her. The English didn't need to torture her. They didn't need to break her will through theology. They just needed to set up the right circumstance and let her human need for basic safety destroy her. It is elegant if you think about it. It is evil, but it is elegant. May 30th, 1431. 800 English soldiers escorted her to the Old Market Square in Rouen. A massive show of force for one girl. The pyre was tall, purposely built higher than usual, so the executioner could not reach her, to strangle her a common mercy, to spare the victim the flames. They wanted her to feel every second. The wood was seasoned, so it would burn hot and fast. They stripped her. They dressed her in a white smock soaked in sulfur to make it burn faster. They put a paper hat on her head that read, heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater, labeling her sins for the crowd. She asked for a crucifix. Her friar gave her one made of sticks, lashed together with string. Just 2 pieces of wood and some binding. But it was Christ. It was enough. She climbed onto the pyre. They chained her to the stake, not loosely, tightly. They wanted to make sure she couldn't fall, couldn't try to escape, couldn't do anything but stand there and burn. The executioner lit the fire. The wood caught immediately, the flames licking up the plaster base. And here is what witnesses reported. She didn't scream curses. She didn't rage against God or the English or the unfairness of any of it. Instead, she called out to the man who had orchestrated her destruction, Bishop Cauchon, "I die through you." It wasn't an accusation shouted in anger. It was a statement of fact. It was her testifying to the truth one last time, even as the flames consumed her. Then she did something that would haunt the consciences of everyone watching. She asked someone to hold the crucifix up high so it would be the last thing she saw above the flames. A simple request, a dying woman wanting to look at Christ while she burned. And as the smoke grew thick, as the heat became unbearable, witnesses reported hearing her voice above the roar of the flames, crying out over and over, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," not once, over and over. The name repeated like a prayer, like a promise, like the only true thing left in a world that had become entirely corrupted. The crowd watched this, thousands of them. French people who had cheered her, English soldiers who had orchestrated her death, priests who had condemned her. And then something happened that the English hadn't anticipated. An English secretary, a man who had been part of the trial, watched as her body blackened in the flames, watched as the fire consumed the peasant girl who had threatened an empire. And he apparently cried out in the marketplace, "We are lost, for we have burned a saint." The fire that consumed her body ignited a legend that would outlast the stone walls of her prison. They did everything they could to make sure her legacy would die with her. After her body was completely charred, they raked back the coals to show the crowd her remains. Proof that she was a woman. Proof that she hadn't somehow magically escaped. Proof that she was dead. Then they burned the corpse again and again. They kept burning until only ash remained. Then they gathered what little was left and threw it into the river Seine. They were trying to make sure that not even her dust could become a relic. Not even her bones could be venerated. They wanted her completely, utterly erased. But something the English didn't account for was already in motion. 25 years later, Joan's family demanded a retrial. The Pope authorized it. And in this rehabilitation trial, over 100 witnesses were called priests, judges, guards, notaries, and they testified under oath in front of the Pope's representative. They testified to the truth. They testified that Joan's confession had been manufactured, that the document she actually signed was nothing like what was filed in court records, that her imprisonment violated church law, that the guards had been systematically abusive, that her guards had taken her dress, forcing her into an impossible choice, that the entire trial was corruption from start to finish. The rehabilitation trial declared the original verdict a complete fraud. Joan's name was cleared. The church officially recognized her virtue. Within a century, she was canonized as a saint. The English had burned a saint, and history proved it. But here is the thing that should chill you in ways that historical facts usually don't. Joan of Arc didn't die in a moment of weakness or spiritual failure. She didn't die because she renounced God. She died because she trusted the law. She died because she believed that there were rules that would protect her. She died because she signed a document thinking it would save her life. And the document was the trap. The system that killed her wasn't incompetent or chaotic. It was perfectly efficient. It had constructed a scenario where being human, needing safety, fearing rape, trying to stay alive would become evidence of heresy. It weaponized her own fear against her. And here is the modern relevance that makes you understand why this story still matters. We see this system everywhere now. It isn't always literal fire. Coerced confessions, legal traps, systems that make it impossible to win. Joan of Arc didn't die because she was weak or wrong. She died because she was caught in a legal machine that was specifically designed to destroy her, and she had no way to escape it. She signed the paper because she wanted to live, and that want for life was turned into proof of her guilt. That is the echo of 1431 that should terrify you. If you think history matters, if you think these stories deserve to be told accurately and completely, subscribe to Medieval Spirits, because the truth doesn't need to stay buried.